Hi everybody. First of all, I just want to say thanks very much for giving us the opportunity to speak here. I'm very honoured to be part of the Salvo research group, and it's probably one of the most interesting things I've ever done in my life. I've been involved in research when I was younger, and it's lovely to return to this. The Salvo Research Group are full of the most incredible bunch of people. They're so enthusiastic, they're so full of life, they're so full of curiosity and interest, and they're incredibly good at finding out and finding information that nobody else has found. So we started out off, I think, really on the premise that we wanted to be able to support the case that eventually would go to the United Nations. We wanted to be able to support the education of the people of Scotland, and that's really in great part what we've tried to do. We've had a little bit of good fortune. I mean, there's times when we've had serendipitous discoveries, and there's times when we've done some really bizarre things to get information. But essentially we have uncovered repositories of documents, we have uncovered records of what really have happened in the Scottish Parliament, for example, and the information on that is displayed in those books at the back there, uncovered by Tom and recovered by Tom and Archie. These are all providing a really important fixed point for us, because essentially one of the things that you probably have noticed and you probably have heard about is that it looks like the UK government is very rapidly editing Hansard to make sure that what they want to portray is what's reflected in what's supposed to be that official record, and of course it isn't. It really isn't. There's lots of errors, there's lots of information that has been heavily edited to suit them. If you try to do any kind of search online, and I defy you to try to do any kind of search online with Google, for example, you'll find it extremely difficult to get truthful information. So there were certain things that we identified very, very quickly that we wanted to know about, and we've been doing a lot of work researching those. I can't, at this point, share everything with you because, as you know, everything is being sort of prepared and geared up to support that case. But I do want to sort of point out a couple of really interesting things. And the first is that you simply would not believe the number of breaches of the Treaty Acts, Articles of Union. You just wouldn't credit it. You wouldn't believe there was so many could possibly happen, and for there to be no apparent reaction from Scotland. Of course, even if there were a big reaction from Scotland, for example, the 1820 uprising, who would have heard of it? Because, as I've said repeatedly, Scotland suffers from generational amnesia. And what brings about this generational amnesia is the active suppression of information, really active suppression of information, the pushing out of lies. But the worst of the lot, the hardest to cope with perhaps for a people, is the suppression of our history in our schools, the suppression of our culture, so that who we actually are as people, we find it almost impossible not even to remember, just to find out about. So in our research, we have looked at these, one of the things we're looking at, is to look at this, what are the breaches of the Treaty Acts, Articles of Union? So I've pulled together just a short list there. They're not all, it's not entirely comprehensive, it's just some of them. But if you look at them, you'll see the sheer scale, enormity and potential impact that each has. And I've not even gone into the technical detail of specifically which article is actually contravening. There's no real necessity to do that in this forum. I mean, there will be, you know, but not in this forum necessarily. But so it's quite interesting to look at this as a list. And it's unfortunately it's really long. So you know, if you get fed up looking at it, we'll just stop that process. The other thing we decided to look at as one of the big chunks we're looking at is what is Scotland's true gross domestic product. Now that is like, God, I don't think Sherlock Holmes could actually track down all that information. And when you're looking at what is our GDP, you immediately come across, well, what tactics does the UK government use to suppress the information? Well, interestingly, it used to report on it annually. What did Scotland actually produce? What was the value of what Scotland produced? And after 1922, which was when Ireland finally succeeded in getting its emancipation, and I hope that word is well chosen, you find that they mysteriously stopped publishing information and they've become progressively more cute about how they've hidden that information. So one of their fantastic tactics, and you might have heard of this, and if you have, I apologise for repeating myself, or anyone else repeat themselves. But essentially what the UK government seeks to do is to completely hide where our major GDP comes from. And for example, the oil and gas. I defy you to try and find out exactly how much oil and gas Scotland produces, because one of the things they did was they divided it into, they started calling it UK continental shelf, right? And Scotland produces about 86% of everything that's produced in the UK continental shelf, so-called. They separated our territorial waters from our Scotland adjacent waters, is what they call it, and they will, and I promise you they'll try and do this, they will try and take away the Scotland adjacent waters. Why? Because that's where the majority of the oil and gas is actually extracted from, and it's also, funnily enough, also where the majority of the offshore wind farms are. And why have they insisted that there are no onshore wind farms? Considering that Scotland alone produces 25% of all of Europe's available wind energy, not produces, I mean harvest, or could harvest. So why would they want everything put offshore? Why is it that all of the renewable electricity that's generated offshore, why does it all come across onshore at Peterhead, and then why is it cabled by massive interconnectors all the way down to the north of England? Why does it bypass so much of Scotland? Because they're not stupid, because they know that if we ever did get our independence, the first thing we'd do is put a meter on those electricity cables, or switch it off until they agreed. Tax it, meter it, or turn it off. How can we do that if the interconnectors all avoid the territory of Scotland? I don't know about you, but I don't have a handy fleet of very fast-moving boats. Do you get what I mean? They've looked to the future, they've planned for the future, they're not stupid. All of the energy is bypassing Scotland. It's all coming into England. The nuclear power stations they're talking about bringing on board, those will be in the Freeport areas.
Over
the nuclear power
over our dead body.
Or somebody's. Anyway, so those are all going to be in the Freeport areas. We will have very little opportunity to prevent them happening, but we must prevent them from having. These are the small portable ones made by Mitsubishi. And I say portable, they're still massive, but they're a lot smaller than Hunterston and things like that. So they're going to place these around. Where's the electricity going? Well, we don't need it, actually. The base load is well handled by loads of different things, but it will go all the way down to England. We're being used as England's battery. We're being used as England's electricity, energy, resource, shop, not even buying from us. So all of that's where we are their cash cow, we are being asset stripped, that's the fact. So the GDP, oil, gas, renewable electricity, that's what produces the most. How can you find out that information? Well, we've been researching it really intensively, and very far from the 89 billion or whatever rubbish they come out with. We're probably looking at the moment, the very, very, very lowest estimate from 2022, 217 billion, but what looks much, much more likely, over 400 billion, and maybe at the other end of it, we may be looking at 600 billion. So we're so far, and we're getting nothing. How do they do it? We effectively, they don't quote value, they quote tax. And then they ratio that tax to not look at our geographical production, but they ratio it down to look at our population production. So it's not value, it's tax. And it's not tax, it's just a population share of that tax. And that's how they reduce it and reduce it and reduce it. Where do they hide all this information? Under corporate agreements, corporate confidentiality. They only publish it in Wood Mackenzie if you're lucky, and then you have to know what you're looking for, and you have to calculate it per wind turbine almost, and per oil well. You can't even get a field. And even if you did get a field, even if you did look at the wind farm fields, what would still happen is that they will claim that's in their UK continental shelf, that's in Scotland adjacent waters, it's not our Scotland territorial waters. There'll be a big fun fight about that as well. Anyway, just to give you an idea of why is it so difficult to calculate Scotland's true gross domestic product, and there you go. But we are making big headway on it, and I think we're almost there.
Yay!
So what we have here is just a few, well, it's about 30 actually, of the really grossest breaches of the articles. I'm not even bothering quoting the articles, they're just so awful. So you start off in 1712, where you've got the House of Lords made the Court of Appeal in the Scottish civil cases, and that's despite the Treaty of Union specifying that Scots law was to remain independent and the Court of Session was to be the highest civil court of Scotland. That obviously had ricochets all the way through Scottish history, and when they basically moved that role to the so-called Supreme Court, again you see the effect. If we can't get justice, because you go to whatever they consider to be the highest court in the land, you're met with the British, in inverted commas, or the UK, in inverted commas, defining interests. So justice in their court, I don't think so. So following the Jacobite Rising, they made huge efforts to blast apart what is essentially the culture of Scotland. And remember what we were saying at the very beginning, they have taken away our culture by taking away our language. If you want to know how Wales has managed to survive hundreds of years of oppression, it's because they have their own language and they use it and they teach it in their schools and they teach their history in their schools, as far as I'm aware. So if we taught our language in our schools, whatever that is, wherever it is within Scotland, if we taught our own history in our schools, what difference would that make to our identity, and why are we not pushing that harder with this flipping, government? Why are we not pushing that harder? So what they did was they blasted apart the clan system. That in itself would have blasted apart also the system of it would have blasted apart not just the ties between and within communities, but it also would have blasted apart any opportunity to get any kind of justice through that clan system as well. If you can move on to point 3. So this is potentially a more minor point in some way, but given that nobody has actually taken the Scottish oath of coronation since, who was the last of it to take it, Sarah? Anne. Aye. So the fact that QE2 gave herself that title was challenged, and as the Church of Scotland was supposed to be the established church, the Church of Scotland, her accession basically putting herself ahead of the Church of Scotland within Scotland was quite a cute move. In 1975, this time, the government of Harold Wilson abolished the status of the royal boroughs in Scotland, despite the Treaty of Union, Acts of Union guaranteeing this status in perpetuity. Now, again, this is partly to do with their culture, it's partly to do with their organisation as a society, it's partly to do with justice, it's to do with the control of our resources. All of these things have been gradually, or perhaps dramatically, removed from Scotland. How do they get away with it? As I said, generational amnesia. They hide it. Have you noticed that all big estates in Scotland have a big giant wall around them? Well, that's so we don't see what big giant estates they are and what riches they have behind those walls. So let's get to the creation of the British Supreme Court, 2005, definite breach of the Treaty of Union, which should have had the Court of Session as the highest court, and the separation of the Scottish legal system, hugely important. For me, one of the worst recently has been the implementation of the innocuously termed Internal Market Bill. You'll notice about Westminster that what they do when they want to bring in something truly heinous is they give it a really innocuous term. You know the Cobra offices where you've got Cabinet Office something or other, BRA, whatever it's said. That place where they make so many so-called decisions. Again, you're just getting this really innocuous terminology to describe something that's actually highly important. This is a trick they actually pull out in lots and lots of research, and see, trying to get through that trick is really, really difficult. So this Internal Markets Bill, when you try and talk to one of your fellow countrymen, one of your friends, one of your relatives, about the effects of the Internal Market Bill, people are aghast. They can't believe that such an innocuously termed piece of legislation could possibly do what it does to Scotland. To my mind, and it is only to my mind, this is one of the worst things that's happened to Scotland in a long time. And when you combine the Internal Market Bill with the Section 35 orders that the Viceroy ruler of Scotland can implement, you can quickly see that in actual fact the Internal Market Bill means that it doesn't matter a toss. Any piece of legislation put out by the Scottish Government just has to be deemed unilaterally by the so-called UK Government as contravening this Internal Market Bill, and it's struck down. And they term it struck down. And I was at Hustings the other day there when the wee Conservative guy was saying, oh, well, we're not sure if we need to strike it down. And I thought, oh, that's really in that, oh, there's a bit of insight there. So the combination of the Section 35 from the Viceroy, meaning that actually they can strike down any piece of legislation the Scottish Government brings in at all, and the Internal Market Bill, which can give them that justification, so-called, means that Scottish Government, to my mind, we no longer have it. We've got an administration administering everything on behalf of our colonial rulers at the moment. But the Internal Market Bill and that Section 35 thing is so destructive. And I've got 2 minutes, and I've got tons to get through.
Selective.
Right, okay. Because you screw I've been told to be selective. Wait a minute, sorry everybody. No, it's okay. Gosh, where are they? Right, I've got 30 things to go through. Okay, wait a minute.
There's a scope for another one-day conference.
Right, okay, so things like the imposition of a hard border between Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland following Brexit is a breach of the Good Friday Agreement, which is an extension of the 1707 Treaty of Union in terms of maintaining peace and stability in the so-called British Isles. Well, they are, I suppose. The passing of the Withdrawal Act has been criticised for breaching the agreement itself. It obviously has been. The imposition of the bedroom tax without any consultation with the Scottish Government whatsoever. The replacement, this is an interesting one, the replacement of the Scottish Parliament's legislative consent motion with the Sewell Convention in the Scotland Act 2016 is a breach. And in actual fact, rather than trying to rattle through the rest of them, I think I'll ask if someone can maybe post them up on the website to look through. I think the fundamental things, the fundamental takeaway points are really, I think, this. Number one, research team are pure game. Number two, the Scotland's true GDP is not just hidden, it's so incredibly actively hidden, it's unbelievable. Unearthing what it is, it has been a real job in itself. Number three, we no longer really have a Scottish Parliament. We genuinely don't. We really are now very, very clearly under colonial administration. And that's really all that the Scottish Government currently does, thanks to the Internal Market Bill and thanks to the Section 35. Now, I could really genuinely could go on and on and on because there's tons, but I just want to thank you very much for listening to this and to ask you to please remember that generational amnesia is a horrible thing. Please put your local elected representatives under as much pressure as you possibly can to force the teaching of Scottish history within Scottish schools and the teaching of the truth with respect to what Scotland is, who Scotland is, and what we actually produce as a country, because we really are being actively asset stripped. Thank you all very much.